Good evening, everyone. We'll start in about 2 minutes. Okay. Well, good evening, everyone. I want to welcome you to the community meeting for the proposed TIF requests for the new neighborhood that we call affectionately the 78. I'm very excited about tonight's presentation because we have an opportunity, an absolute great opportunity to activate a large parcel of land, 62 acres of land that has sat underutilized, fallow, what some of us would typically call a wasteland for many decades. And this evening, we will have an agenda that one provides an update on the construction of the Chicago Fire Stadium. And then following that presentation, we will have a presentation on the details of the proposed TIF request, followed by a Q&A session for the members of the community that are here this evening. I ask that you put your questions in the Q&A box, and for convenience, we will be consolidating like questions so that we don't have a repeat, because I'm sure there'll be many questions on this topic. Before we get started, I would like to turn the floor over to my colleague, Alderman Bill Conway. I think he has joined us. And Alderman Conway, could you please introduce yourself?
Absolutely. I'm Alderman Bill Conway, the 34th Ward. I want to thank you, Alderwoman Dowell, for convening this meeting and inviting me. I represent the area just north of the 78, and looking forward to hearing the feedback of all your constituents and the whole neighborhood. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Alderman Conway. And we also have with us Alderman Jason Irvin, who is the alderman to the west of the river. Alderman Irvin, could you please introduce yourself?
Thank you, Alderman Dow. Again, Alderman Jason Irvin of the 28th Ward. We are your neighbors to the west across the river of the 78. I'll leave another joke later on, but be that as it may, we're here to support the efforts of the community in revitalizing this great site.
Thank you, Alderman Irvin. I don't know if we're joined by Alderman Lee at this point, but when she comes in, she'll get in where she fits in. So with that, I want to turn it over to Dave Baldwin, who is the president of the Chicago Fire. Dave?
Thank you, Alderman Dowell. It's great to be here with everybody. It is just over a year ago since the Chicago Fire announced an ambitious plan to privately invest $750 million, an unprecedented investment in the South Loop into a Chicago Fire stadium, the best soccer stadium in North America. And there's been a ton of momentum over the last 12 months. Normally on these calls, I'm joined by Ari Glass, the head of Mansueto Real Estate. Unfortunately, Ari's had some travel complications and I believe is on a plane at the moment. So I will be taking this solo, but I did just want to share some updates on behalf of Ari as to the progress that the fire have made. Obviously, we've had a variety of these community meetings and meetings with public officials over the last year. And on March 3rd, we hosted a ceremonial groundbreaking out at the site. Immediately after that ceremonial groundbreaking, no time was wasted. Our Chicago-based contracting team led by Pepper, GMA, and All Construction got to work on driving over 1,000 H-piles into the ground. And this work was completed last month. Since that, in late May, we began concrete work on the site. And then later this year, you'll start to see steel and precast come out of the ground to start to form what will essentially be the shell of the stadium and then eventually an enclosed stadium. We remain fully on track to open in the summer of 2028 for the start of the 2028-2029 MLS season. And those are the main construction updates that I'm sharing on behalf of Ari and the club. I would say, hopefully through this process over the last year, we've attracted some new soccer fans. But in the case people haven't been following the Fire are currently a top 5 team in Major League Soccer. Hugo Kuipers is one of our 2 All-Stars selected to represent Chicago in the All-Star game this summer, and he's also the Golden Boot leader, meaning that he has scored the most goals of any player in MLS currently. And I imagine people have been seeing on TV at home that the Fire are on a little bit of a break for the World Cup right now. So we are on a 6-week pause as the World Cup is running. And in the World Cup, we have Chicago's own Chris Brady representing Team USA, the U.S. men's national team, as a goalie. And then we also have Chicago's own Brian Gutierrez, who is from Berwyn and grew up in Chicago, played at the Chicago Fire Academy, and played for the Chicago Fire for 5 years before moving down to Chivas. He's currently representing Mexico in the World Cup. So not only a lot of momentum out at the site, but a lot of momentum for us on the pitch as we continue to strive to win a championship for Chicago. So that is the latest and greatest here with what we have going on with the Fire. And next, I will pass it over to Jeff at DPD.
Before we go to Jeff, I'm told that Alderman Lee has joined us from the 11th Ward. And Alderman Lee, if you want to introduce yourself and say anything you want to say, have
Sure.
at it.
Hi, everybody. I'm sorry I joined a little bit late. Lots of constituent stuff going on here in the 11th Ward, but thank you, Alderman Dowell, for the invitation to join tonight. And we're just as excited to hear about what's going on and to have a robust conversation tonight. So looking forward to hearing from DPD. Thanks.
Thank you. Thank you, Alderman Lee. And then we'll turn it over to Jeff Cohen from the Department of Planning and Development, Deputy Commissioner. Jeff?
Thanks, Alderwoman. Thank you all for coming out tonight. Again, my name is Jeff Cohen. I'm the Deputy Commissioner for the Bureau of Economic Development. And I wanted to take this time to kind of go through the plan and investment the city is making. Next slide, please. So to set the stage, I just want to make sure that everyone understands this is a 40-year vacant site that has sat vacant and disconnected the surrounding communities. Not because of any lack of vision, but because we didn't have the catalyst like the Fire Stadium to support the infrastructure needs for development. I'm also going to go into a little bit of an explanation later on about what TIF is, but high level, tax increment financing exists for this exact situation. It's public funding for infrastructure in blighted and underutilized areas. You may have heard the term of TIF before. It's kind of misunderstood, but again, it's a TIF. TIF is a financial tool that pays for this public infrastructure. We're also going to talk about what we're investing in on this site. This is going to be a $126 million reduction in the overall request, but a broader scope of the public improvements that will be delivered to the site itself. And then I'll also discuss the public funding structure for how the TIF will be invested. So what is TIF before I get into the actual funding of this? So TIF stands for tax increment financing. And I want you to put that kind of concept to the side for a second. Right now, I would want to say that this vacant land generates almost no property taxes. With the development that's happening here, the property will become worth more and thus generate real estate taxes, which will help fund the future improvements itself. This is important as it does not come out of your pocket or pull from schools, parks, or city resources currently. It's paid back through the growth that doesn't exist right now. The key point here is that taken from the reimbursement model through public infrastructure, that this ensures that it gets built and it gets paid for in the future. This is also important because the city is going to be monitoring the development for both construction milestones, MBEWE participation, as well as the quality of construction materials and procedures. So that's why this list here on the screen is really important. People hear infrastructure and they kind of tune out. So I want to get into exactly what these specific benefits mean and what would be reimbursed. So the funding that the city is proposing today is going to be funding new public streets and utilities. So think the roads, water, and sewer lines that let anyone reach the site and activate it for future development. We'll also bring publicly owned parking structure and accessible space, so allowing for parks and gathering spaces open to everybody. We'll also be funding new pedestrian, bicycle, and transit connections, so you can walk, bike, or take transit to the site itself. This will also rehabilitate the river wall, repairing the waterfront structure that protects the land and the river edge for an improved river walk, as well as new public amenities. In addition, this will also help with site preparation, enabling this infrastructure. This is the unglamorous kind of groundwork that has to come first before anything can be built. Why these things qualify? There's a common thread. Every single item on this list is a public improvement and is owned by the city. That's not an accident, that's a rule per the TIF Act. And TIF is legally meant to fund these public infrastructure projects in the area. Again, these investments and these public infrastructure improvements are going to unlock the value of this 40-year vacant site. Next slide, please. So what will the TIF not fund? I know that this is something that will be questioned from everybody. This will not fund any private development, including the Chicago Fire Stadium or any future vertical development rights. I want to be clear about that. Again, it's not going to fund any future development rights or ongoing operating expenses. Next slide. So what is going to happen is we're going to be taking a site where this was depicted in 1929, where the Chicago River used to flow, and redeveloping it into what will become the first phase of the 78. Currently, as Dave was describing, the fire is currently working on their site plan, where the next slide shows the current conditions. So we're going to be taking this now vacant site with caissons and ready for vertical development and transforming it into a multi-phase infrastructure and development project outlined on the next slide. So the primary infrastructure investments are going to be located to the north of the stadium, and they will complement the stadium. These will not be used or specific for the fire's use, although there will be some complementary uses that the city will offer. But we'll also be able to develop new streets, LaSalle Street, 13th Street, Clark Street, Roosevelt improvements, along with the river line public amenities, including new soccer fields, pickleball courts, and the rideshare lot. We'll also be improving accessibility to Clark Street through a pedestrian connection bridge on 15th Street. Next slide. Getting into the specific improvements, this slide outlines the costs associated with each one of those. As you can see, the bulk of the TIF investment will relate to what we're calling public structure and open space. So I want to also emphasize that this is not just $216 million to build a parking lot. This is critical infrastructure, including deep foundations, the parking structure itself, as well as the capacity to hold the LaSalle Street and 13th Street that will provide the connectivity to the communities. There will be additional road infrastructure, the creation of a new LaSalle Street, the connection of 13th Street, and a further connection of LaSalle Street that connects the northern portion of the 78 to the southern portion. This will also include improvements to Clark Street for accessibility and beautification. Again, as I mentioned earlier, additional improvements would be for the river's edge construction, which will help retain and be able to facilitate the public improvements along the river's edge and the Riverwalk. Additionally, there's going to be subsequent metro improvements. So there will be track upgrades as well as safety and security upgrades to the tracks themselves. And then finally, there will be a pedestrian bridge located on 15th Street that will connect the 78 to the east and provide additional connectivity to other communities. And I think with that, I will pass it back to Andrew.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrew Obendorf. I'm a design director at Gensler here in Chicago. And I've been working with Related on this site for almost 10 years now. And we're really excited about the momentum that's gained, but also continuing to work and plan the future of this site. And I think we have a series of diagrams here that start to pull out the pieces of what Jeff just described in terms of the overall into individually what the impacts on the site will be. But the first two are really important. This infrastructure supports a pedestrian network that not only unlocks access to the site, so it's to the stadium, but it's also the grade change between Roosevelt and Wells Street, and eventually to the riverfront, from north to south on the site, connections in the city that don't exist today, but also connecting to the broader pedestrian network that exists in the South Loop. In tandem with that are new bike lanes. We're proposing 1.5 miles of additional bike lanes that not only connect north and south on Wells Street, but also throughout the site and help on a bike navigate the grade change of around 30 feet from the Roosevelt level down to the Wells Street level and access to the riverfront. So again, one by one, we'll go through each of these individual pieces and talk about the benefits to the site and to the city. Clark Street pairs with that pedestrian connectivity near 15th Street that Jeff mentioned, but we're also planning to widen sidewalks, and we're working with CDOT to increase sidewalk widths, protection from vehicles to pedestrians, and generally make a better streetscape environment for that street across the length of our site. Roosevelt Road gets improved streetscaping and connectivity for the first time to this site from that upper level, as well as a new intersection at LaSalle Street. That'll be one of our primary entries to the site, along with widened sidewalks for that increased pedestrian traffic, as we'll have people walking from transit to the site on this primary corridor. The second addition to that in terms of access is a bridge over the Metro easement at 13th Street, unlocking our connection from Clark Street to the site that has never existed. Crossing that Metro bridge, and that works in tandem both for vehicles and for pedestrians as an access point. And it works in tandem with the Metro overbuild that we're planning between 13th Street and Roosevelt to cap the Metro easement and provide a really primary pedestrian access point from Roosevelt to our site at that upper level. A knockdown benefit of this is reduction of train noise as the train crosses the site from north to south or south to north, and especially on the Roosevelt corridor. Metro improvements, this includes screening from primary public spaces, both on our site and from Clark Street, but also operational improvements for Metro for efficiency and safety as they move along the eastern edge of the proposed site. The river wall is in bad shape, and it's about 0.5 mile of river wall that will be stabilized to replace deteriorated current conditions. Remediation work will also enable the future plans for privately financed public river walk that will span that entire 0.5 mile from north to south and connect downtown to Pinktown Park. This is the current state of that river wall. And it's quite clear that it needs some work, it needs some repair. So this is part of a development strategy, but it's also a safety strategy, and it enables us to do the future plans of the river, but also has benefits in terms of construction logistics as we start working on the site. A big one is road infrastructure. The reason that the site's been so challenged for so long is the inability to get to that site. Well Street is already in place, and this next series of CDOT right-of-ways connect both from the upper level to the lower level, but also set our street framework for future development, both in the first phase and the long-term vision of the site. It provides those pedestrian routes that we talked about. It also provides bike routes throughout the site, and really importantly, utilities to serve these future buildings and unlock the potential of the site. So in the pink shade here, you see the public parking structure that spans from Roosevelt Road to the soccer stadium, and then along the east edge of the soccer stadium, along LaSalle Street, to provide around 1,200 publicly owned parking spaces. I think another great benefit of this is, Roosevelt is at an upper level. The rest of the site sits down low, about a 30-foot difference. And this mitigates that issue of a grade change onto this site. We're going to bring people on to the site at the height of Roosevelt, and then we have strategic ways to bring them down to Well Street and further to the riverfront, but it really unlocks the potential of this site. The darker purple boxes that you see are infrastructure for that garage, be it access points or pedestrian access points from the upper level to the lower level of the site. And now I'll hand it to Kurt Bailey, who's going to talk really about the community amenities and the great things that this unlocks for the site.
Thank you, Andrew. Thank you for your 10 years of partnerships, as you mentioned. And I think I want to say thanks to a few people. First, Alderman Dowell, for your partnership and leadership. And of course, the other aldermen on the call, Conway, Irvin, and Lee, for your partnership and your thoughts along the way. This project is important to all of us. Also to the fire and Joe Mansueto, he's been an incredible partner, but Ari and Dave and your leadership has been great. How terrific it is to see the project actually coming out of the ground. I think there's something remarkable about that, and everybody can agree progress like that is great for our city, and we're going to create a special place. Jeff and everybody at DPD has been exceptional at the city, as well as the mayor's office, for their partnership. But maybe mostly important is to thank everyone who's on the call today, because this is a public-private partnership. This is 10 years of working with all of our neighbors to get your ideas on how we can create a really special place. And I think we are on the cusp of this, of a project that will be meaningful far beyond the boundaries of the 62 acres, but will really reverberate through the city. And I think that's evidenced by this kind of list of the amenities. I'm going to just run through a couple of them that I think are really important. The first is the riverfront. Later we talk about here a taxi stop. But I think every boat that travels along the river will now come down and visit the 78. And if you are a resident of the area, if not even on the 78, but nearby, you'll have the water taxis that are going to be coming down. You'll have all of the architectural boat doors will come and stop at our site. And along the river, you're going to have the energy and a lot of the feeling that you see up in our core downtown. And the riverfront has become one of America's great public spaces. And what this will do is drag that energy all the way down to Ping Tom Park. And Ping Tom Park and the 78 will become the southern anchor to this incredible public space. And so the benefit of that and what that means to us, just as residents of the city, of people that care about the city, is kind of almost immeasurable. There will also be enormous amounts of public space, the multi-use fields, the soccer pitch, the pickleball courts that we're going to have, all to be used by people that live in the neighborhood, by people that are our neighbors. And there, of course, as we talk about the parking, there will be an enormous amount of public parking as well. While the parking will be used for obviously for fire games, it also will be a new jumping off spot for people that are coming to visit our city, that are coming to visit the riverfront, that will park there and explore this area. And then, what this infrastructure does is it unlocks our ability to develop the entire site. And so, this site, which has sat so long dormant, you just saw it as the river used to run right through the middle of it. Now it gets unlocked. We continue the city grid. We do all the things that make a difference to us in many, many ways. And as the next slide indicates, there are also some enormous financial benefits, and as there should be. When the city makes a large investment like this in infrastructure, there should be what we call a yield on cost, which is an $8 billion investment when we get to a full build out on the site, an unprecedented kind of number in the history of downtown of investment. Thousands and thousands of jobs. We're saying 10,000. I think it probably will be greatly exceed that on full build out. An enormous stabilized annual economic input of over $2 billion created by this project and what happens on the site. A number of permanent jobs. Again, we've tried to be fairly conservative, but about 5,000 permanent jobs will be a result of this. And a huge boost to the tax base of the city of Chicago, which I think, again, we can all agree is very, very important to the health of our city. And then as well, we plan on building a lot of housing here. Again, those are things that will be important for energy and creation of, making the place great. And we want to create a great place that people want to live. We will also create a lot of affordable homes. We have been one of the largest players in Chicago in affordable housing for over a decade. We have almost 10,000 units. Affordable housing is at our core. We are just finishing up on our building at 400 Lakeshore Drive, which will have 20% affordable in it. We were not required to do any affordable in that building. We chose to. That'll be 130 units right on the lake. So we're going to build a lot of affordable housing here as well and create a great place. And again, we appreciate all of your time and input into this project. And so with that, I think we'll kick it back to Q&A and back to the Alderman.
Thank you, Kurt. We'll be going through a series of questions now. I promise every question that is put in the chat will be answered. The first question, although I think this person has the numbers wrong. Related Midwest promised a substantial reduction from the $450 million TIF district approved by the City Council, but the request before us now is only 25 million less. I think those numbers are not accurate. Jeff, if you would correct the numbers on the assumption. And then the question is, why should the public be spending so much for what is only at this point a soccer stadium that will be used about 30 days per year? Jeff.
Sorry. So the original TIF request that was approved in 2019 was for approximately 563 million. The current request and revised plan is about $126 million now. So the benchmark of what was originally approved to what is being proposed today, there is $126 million differential.
All right. Do you want to answer the second part? I think many of us could answer that. We'll start with Kurt. Why should the public be spending so much for what is only at this point a soccer stadium that will be used 30 days per year?
Yes, thank you, Alderman. I mean, again, as we went through, it's so much more that will be built on the site, whether it's the massive amount of affordable housing or the magnificent Riverwalk that will be the southern anchor, or the millions of visitors that will come to this site and spend money in our city and spend money in our hotels. And then, again, this is something that we would not be able to do. It is infrastructure that will benefit all of the city. Everything from Well Street, which was, is being constructed, to the ability to be able to walk down to the riverfront from Roosevelt Road, the ability to matriculate onto the site from the L stops on Roosevelt, and be able to walk down to the river. So the benefits here are myriad. The returns, are large, not just in dollars, but in creating a place that is special, and I think will be something that everybody in the city is extremely proud of. It's more than a stadium, although again, the stadium is such a critical piece to be able to kick off the energy and the ability to build this great place that we've been working on for now 10 years.
And I just want to add to that. This site, in my mind, is like, has been what I would call a physical barrier that does not connect the north side of the city and the downtown to the rest of Chicago, whether it's Chinatown or Bronzeville or Pilsen. And I think the infusion of these infrastructure dollars, which unlocks the potential not only for the site, but also for the city of Chicago to have greater connectivity to, Pilsen, Chinatown, Bronzeville, the South Loop, and the downtown. This is like the missing piece to me, the missing link. And I think for a citywide an investment of public dollars that has so much benefit, not just in terms of property taxes in the future, but also of bringing people together and connecting them across what is no longer going to be a physical barrier, I think is important. Jeff, do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, again, I think the reestablishment of the grid and connections point for this site is critical from a city perspective. Again, it unlocks not just the northern portion for future vertical development with the construction of the infrastructure, but opens up the southern portion for future development and connectivity, as Alderman Dowell said, to other communities that can access the loop, as well as the other amenities that are downtown.
Okay. All right. Moving on, the second question is, will there be any public toilets outside the stadium? I think that might be a question for Dave or Kurt. I know that Dave is responsible for the inside of the stadium. I don't know about the outside of the stadium. So Kurt, I'm going to throw that to you.
Yeah, no, and I will take that on. We haven't figured that piece of out. I would say certainly, if this is a game day question, I would imagine we would have facilities for folks outside if we have large gatherings outside. And I think we have been working on a plan to have some form of public facilities outside, but we haven't finished that yet. If that's something that would be important, we would be happy to figure out how to do that, and we'll work with the alderman on that.
All right. Next question. The stadium has continuously been touted as quote unquote privately funded. So why is this TIF necessary? This is essentially asking taxpayers to fund the project.
Take that. Again, as I stated earlier, no TIF dollars are going into funding the construction of the stadium. The TIF incentive is specifically meant to support the infrastructure to help with the future development of the 78 and is complementary to the fire stadium. We found a way to innovatively include a cash flowing portion that the city can benefit from as part of the overall development. But I do want to make sure that everyone knows that the city is not investing in any portion of the fire stadium directly.
And Dave, could you just repeat for those who might have just joined us late, how much is this new Chicago Fire Stadium costing the Chicago Fire, and where is the money to build it coming from?
Sure. So the stadium is being 100% privately funded by our owner and chairman, Joe Mansueto, who has lived in Chicago for the last 40 years. It is a $750 million private investment, getting upwards of almost $800 million at this point. that we're pouring into the 78, and the entire stadium is being privately funded by Joe.
All right, thank you. Question for you, Jeff. What is the estimated property taxes in the next 10 years that this development will pay?
So based on current projections, the stadium specifically, on average, pay around $7 to $8 million of property taxes, but the district itself is probably going to create about $11 million per year, and then over the next, call it 15 years, on average, around $17 million.
All right, thank you. Will the TIF fund housing in this area? Jeff?
This specific request does not include that, but TIF is definitely there to help support affordable housing development.
Well,
Kurt?
I would add that by building the infrastructure, we'll unlock the ability to build a lot of residential, which will be 20% affordable. So in not directly, but certainly indirectly, it will create a lot of housing and affordable housing.
And to kind of parlay on that, again, the building of the infrastructure is a key component to any future affordable or residential development.
Okay, thank you. Next question. Why on earth is there a surface parking lot? Why can't it be covered with green space? Dave?
Sure. So the surface parking lot that's being depicted to the south is a temporary meanwhile use, and I'm stealing that from Andrew at Gensler as he smiles affectionately, meaning that this is a space that will we will use for parking down on the south for our events. It's not just soccer. Obviously, there's going to be comedy shows, concerts, everything else. Where Related has a long-term plan to develop that. And so over time, we plan on the number of event goers that are using their own car to get to the stadium to shift down, and for more people to access the stadium through public transportation as the rest of the site becomes alive. So that is essentially a meanwhile use. Where the parking garage to the north will be more of obviously a long-term solution to activate the 78, and the fire will lease that space on our match days and concerts.
All right, and Andrew, for you, I did see a patch of green closer to Roosevelt and State. Is that a green space that is going to be developed? Am I reading that right?
There's a lot of green space across the site. I think in the long-term vision for the site, there's around 7 acres of open public space, and that certainly pulls itself north towards Roosevelt and Clark, and exists around the stadium. We have large crowds of people, but we're also developing a neighborhood. So it's a blend of large gathering spaces and more intimate spaces for the future development, and it's certainly supported by this infrastructure that's necessary to unlock the site.
Okay, I didn't mean to say State, I meant Clark. You're
Yep.
absolutely right.
I
Okay.
also add that part of
Yeah.
the podium development includes a 2-acre publicly open space that would be privately managed as well as part of the phase building construction.
All right. The next question, will there be a new TIF for each new phase of the development?
I'll just speak from our standpoint. We don't have any plans for an additional TIF. I think if you look at what will happen on the south end of the site, as it stands today, it's going to be mostly residential. And we would probably have, kind of some open space around that, but none that would be kind of, TIF eligible or needed. So that is not in the queue today.
All right. What about the commercial that is intended for the north end of the site?
When you say what about, Alderman, you mean where
You're
we're
not
building?
contemplating using the TIF for the commercial elements of the site to the
No.
north?
Nothing vertical is TIF eligible, or do we consider, or do we think about using it for TIF? No.
Okay, just wanted to make that clear. Next question, how will the connection to Roosevelt Road work? I think that's to you, Andrew.
Yeah, sure. Um, so the top of the public parking structure will align with Roosevelt Road. So that sidewalk that exists there today, with the bollards and the guardrail, those will come down and will connect seamlessly from Roosevelt Road onto the top of that deck. And that'll be those public open spaces, future vertical development, and it'll combine between the cap of the Metra that we talked about. It'll combine with LaSalle Street as a north-south connector onto the site. And everybody will come in at grade on the Roosevelt level, certainly accessing from the north. And then we have several transition points that'll bring you from that elevated deck down. One of the great benefits of that as well is, as a user of the stadium, you come in directly at the concourse level, right? The soccer team is also aligned with these datums of the city. So it'll be seamless for pedestrians to be able to access both the riverfront, these great public spaces, but also directly into the soccer stadium.
Okay, thank you. Are the bike lanes protected bike lanes? I think CDOT is on here.
Yes, good
Vic,
evening. That's something we're working with
Vic, could you
developer.
introduce yourself, please, for the record?
Yeah, good evening, everyone. I'm Vic Krishnamurti, Managing Deputy Commissioner with Chicago Department of Transportation. And thank you for the question, Chairwoman Dowell. We are working with the developer to coordinate the design of the internal roadways to have the maximum comfort and safety. So looking at things like protected bike lanes, raised intersections, and raised crosswalks. So there's a very comfortable environment for people to move around, as well as the most that we can do on Roosevelt Road as well. It's very constrained because it's on a bridge, but certainly looking for like the highest quality, safest connections for all people accessing this great site.
Thank you. Next question. Has there been discussion of a new metro station or stop at the 78, similar to the 35th SOX platform? Kurt.
Yeah, that's a great question. We have looked at that. I think because the Metra stop where it dead ends is so close to us, it's 2 blocks away, that we have assumed that that would work terrific for anyone taking the Metra into a game. That being said, we would be happy to work with Metra if they wanted to create a new stop there, in creating access and ways for fans to access the game from there. We brought it up to them. It hasn't gotten a lot of traction, but we thought about it and discussed it, and would still be open to it if Metro was pushing for that.
All right, thank you for that. The river design guidelines and other policy typically put the development and operating expenses of the seawall and the riverfront path on the developer. Why is the city taking on not only the construction expense, but also the long-term operation and maintenance of this area? What agency, DPD, CPD, I guess that's Park District, will be responsible for the riverfront path?
So I think I need to make sure we're clear that the city's only funding the reconstruction of the seawall, the river wall, and that the river walk will be the developer's private responsibility, as well as the maintenance and ongoing operations for both of those components. So the city will not be retaining any long-term maintenance or operation for either of those.
That was very clear, Jeff. All right. The construction trucks have been going south of 18th Street on Wentworth, even though they agreed not to. The trucks are also uncovered and are dropping debris onto the road. This shows a disregard to the people of Chinatown. If the 78 developers cannot even honor, hold on a second, I have to move this up. If the 78 developers cannot even honor something they agreed to do from the beginning of this development, how will they be treating the Chinatown community going forward? Dave Baldwin, I'm throwing that to you.
Sure. I think given that the fire are the group that is doing most of the current work, I would assume that it was our stadium project, not necessarily the larger 78 development that caused this. And so first and foremost, I want to say sorry that that has happened. I can assure you that there is no intentional disregard of anyone here taking place. This was flagged to our construction team this week. It was addressed with the truck company that the construction team has been using, as well as several of the subcontractors. And we have their commitment that it'll be covered and that they are using a new route. Now, some of the route is specific to transportation laws on which roads trucks can be used. But I've been assured by our construction team that there is a new route that they will be using and that the trucks will be covered. So I want to thank Alderman Lee for flagging that with Alderman Dowell, which made its way to us here, and we've recently hopefully handled that. But in the event that we haven't, I would encourage everyone to feel free to, one, not only let your alderman know, but feel free to contact the fire directly. I've done this before, but I'm happy to give out my email. My email is dbaldwin, BALDWIN, at chicagofirefc.com, dbaldwin at chicagofirefc.com. And anytime those things happen, if it ever makes its way to me, I'm happy to address it with our owner's rep, CA Icon, as well as the construction team of Pepper, GMA, and all. And appreciate that getting flagged, and we'll make sure it's handled moving forward.
Thank you. Next question. Why was the decision made to abandon the plan to extend 15th Street under the railroad tracks? I don't see how anyone would want to live or work in that corner of the development without any vehicle access. I think I'll turn that over to Andrew with the combination of VIG from CDOT.
Well, let me address that, if you would, Alderman, first. I may answer. I mean, that's a comment that makes some sense. We spent 6, maybe 8 years working with Metra to try to get to an agreement to move the tracks far enough off of Clark Street. Because if you think about how close they are to Clark Street, you don't have the space to either go over them and connect to Clark Street or under them. So you have to move the tracks, which we were going to do about 300 feet west. And that would allow us the space to be able to go under the tracks and connect. We were unable to get to an agreement, in all that time. But by the way, a negotiation which included us paying for all new tracks and everything for Metra. So it was, difficult not to get to that. We abandoned that, and because we couldn't get to an agreement, and very close thereafter, we were lucky enough to have the fire decide they wanted to locate on our site, and only fit on the site because we didn't locate. So while it was painful when we weren't able to do it, at the end, turned out to be something I think will be a great positive for the city, and we will work on lots of means for those folks to be able to get in and out of the site. They will have access to Clark Street at 13th, to Roosevelt Road, to Wells Street, both north and south. So there will be a lot of ways to kind of access the site vehicularly from the southern end.
All right, next question. What exactly will the Roosevelt Road improvements look like? How will the improvements address current traffic congestion and lack of cyclist safety infrastructure? These issues will only be worsened once the site is developed. Vig?
Sure. Good evening. So this is something that we're looking at closely with as we finalize the engineering plans for the new roadways within the development site, how it ties into Roosevelt Road. So Roosevelt Road from the River Bridge to the west all the way to Clark Street is going to be reconfigured in coordination with the developer building that south side of Roosevelt Road. That they'll have to tie into with the decks and public space elements that we heard about today. So that provides opportunities for enhanced pedestrian circulation and flow into some of those plaza areas, especially east of LaSalle Street, to accommodate people coming in and have more room for people walking. We're also looking at the CTA the bus lanes, opportunities for bus lanes on Roosevelt Road through this segment, particularly. That's an important way that people are going to be moving around. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we're also seeing what space there is for enhancing the cycling facilities coming from the river to Clark Street, which is the main focus of the frontage of this development. So it is a constrained space because, as many of you may know, Roosevelt Road coming off the bridge continues on a structure. It's essentially an extension of that bridge. So within that available space, we're going to do everything we can, working closely with Mr. Bailey and the design team to really maximize every inch and give the safest possible best experience for all modes of transportation. We looked at a traffic study that was done during the approval process for this, which I think, met with alderwomen in your community some months ago and talked about the results of those traffic studies. We could certainly get that into more detail, but I want to make sure there's room for all your questions. And if there are any specific traffic questions, we can certainly answer those in a follow-up. But there is a robust traffic management plan that the developer plans to use traffic aids and other operational techniques on the game days to make sure things move within the area. So we're confident that this is something that can operate.
And I guess a related question is the next one. Why are public subsidies not being used for public transportation other than pedestrian roadways when there's clearly adequate TIF funding that could be used?
I think the focus of the development plan right now is to get those core infrastructures, the roadway network, the utilities, and things that will enable development to happen, the catalytic investment of the stadium, priming the site for other vertical development that we heard about today, like housing and affordable housing. And there's certainly opportunities, I would say, in the future to look at other investments. But in terms of the critical path to this development as it's being proposed, the TIF as presented by Jeff at DPD outlines those core roadway infrastructure elements that then will allow this site to develop. As we've seen, it's been undeveloped for many decades.
And I'll add here that this stadium and this site is, so well served by public transportation. I mean, when you compare it to the White Sox or even to Wrigley, just think of the number of trains and buses that connect to this site in particular. The red line, the green line, the orange line, the number 12, 18, 29, 62, and 24 bus, not to mention the Metro stop. And when the riverfront is done, we'll have water taxis and that go from Michigan Avenue all the way to Chinatown. So I think that this area is well served by public transportation. All right, next question. Is $100 million plus standard cost for maybe 1 to 2 miles of new roads? That seems very expensive. Does that include utilities, electricity, sewage, etc.? I assume that has capacity to serve future housing and commercial space.
I think
I
I can
don't know
take
who
the
to
first
throw
crack
that
at that.
to.
I think that the $100 million is a reflection of the complexity of this infrastructure development as well. It will not just serve for the utilities, but also the intricacy of bringing the grade down from Roosevelt to the river level down at the southern end of the site. I would also say that the 100 million is going to ensure that these are built to the highest standards for longevity as well. So I don't want to speak out of turn, but if
Okay, anyone else want to add to that? If not, we'll move on. Why wasn't the TIF allocation discussed in a community meeting before the stadium was approved by City Council and broke ground?
I know we have had, probably at least, I don't know, double digits in meetings about TIF and TIF allocations and and those things along the course. So we have had a lot of discussion about TIF, and again, we had an original TIF finished in 2019 and have been working on this with TIF in the discussion for about a decade. So we've had a lot of meetings where we've talked about TIF on this project.
Right, and we did have community meetings about the ad nauseum. I won't say ad nauseum, but we've had a lot of meetings regarding the Chicago Fire Stadium and the housing and retail development that was to also come to this area. TIF was always in the mix, and I think not knowing the specifics of the Chicago Stadium, excuse me, the Chicago Fire Stadium needs and also the needs of the neighborhood to come, we weren't able to come out until right now. The next question is, how will the pitches and pickleball courts remain truly public? Will the park district manage them, or will the fire charge dollars for the public to use it? Well, I don't think that's the Chicago Fire question. I think
No, Charlie, if you're on, we have an agreement with an operator on those things. I think that those in their current form and space will have to move given the construction going on. But we want to continue to have fun things to do on the site, as we call them, meanwhile uses, which Dave was alluding to earlier. All of those, will be available to the public. Some, they have to be built and then produce revenue. So like playing pickleball at the courts in the West Loop, you would, rent a court for a period of time, or if you wanted to play on the soccer fields, you would utilize those. So they're for public use, but may have a charge to them. And we'll continue to try to have cool, fun things to do on the site, and would, again, welcome any ideas or anyone from the neighborhood who wants to, put their own fun use on the site. We have space, and we'd love to work with you.
Next question, which I will take. What is the 15th Street pedestrian access over Clark Street? And will it encourage soccer spectators to try to park in Dearborn Park 2 and walk over the pedestrian access instead of using the Roosevelt Road parking and pedestrian access? Maybe Kurt, you could speak, or Andrew speak specifically to the pedestrian access, and I'll speak to the parking in Dearborn Park 2.
Yeah, I mean, we think pedestrian access from the east is important, and Alderman, you've talked about it. I think somebody who's at one of the places east of Dearborn Park, having lunch someplace and then wants to stroll over to the game, those are public streets, and I think that would be a great way for them to walk over. And then we want to provide, and I think you have been a leader on this, provide a pedestrian access over Clark Street, as it is, as everyone's aware, a very fast moving street. And we'd like to have a way for people to get over there that works. We haven't decided exactly where or how that's going to go, but we're committed to kind of making that work. There aren't facilities for people to kind of park in those neighborhoods, and I think we want to create parking both on our site, as Dave alluded to, with the surface parking that we, and talk about surface parking for a second. We want to build on top of that as fast as we can. That's on us. We want that to go away because we want to be building buildings and being successful on the site, creating the areas. So that's clearly on us. But yeah, we've provided a lot of parking on site. There is a lot of additional parking already just to the north of us in the Roosevelt collection, over 1,500 spaces. And I would assume that that's where most people will park to attend these games. And then, of course, because we're in downtown Chicago, there'll be a lot of people taking public transportation or divvies or ride shares or those things.
And I'll just add that Dearborn Park 2 has been there for, many decades now. And I think people know that it's not an area to park, for example, and go over to watch football games. I anticipate that that'll be the same kind of thinking here for the Chicago Fire Stadium. In addition, Dearborn Park 2 is a residential permanent parking area. So that should be a deterrent. And the only place that I think is accessible for non-Dearborn Park 2 residents to park is at South Loop Elementary, which I know has entered into a contract with CPS to allow a private vendor to park cars now for people who want to use that space in order to access Soldier Field, to walk over to Soldier Field. So I don't anticipate that this will be a problem. And certainly if it is, the Alderman's office should be able to assist in that regard. Next question. As a South Loop resident, I'm curious whether any of the multi-use spaces in phase 1 or future phases will include dedicated dog-friendly areas, not just general green space, but intentional design for dog parents. The South Loop has one of the highest concentration of dog owners in the city, and safe, well-designed dog spaces are a real community need. Is that being considered in the planning?
We absolutely will take a look at that. We've built a great dog park at One Bennett Park, a public park that we constructed in South Streeterville. And we think it's a great use, and it will be important for all of our residents as well. So I would say for sure we will have dog-friendly facilities within the development.
All right, Kurt, this question is for you. This comes up every meeting. How many affordable units will be included, and what income brackets will they serve? What areas median income is being used to calculate affordable housing?
Right. So yes, I would say we are going to build 20% affordable housing in our development. So when we build an apartment building, 20% would be affordable. The levels of income that are set for those 20% can vary a little bit, but basically they are off the AMI that you're indicating, which is set for, I believe, the city of Chicago. That's the AMI that will drive but that changes every year. Today it's somewhere you're right around 50% of AMI, which goes to a low of somewhere around 36,000 for a 1-bedroom, and I think if I was looking at it today, up to 60-some thousand for a 4-person household. But that is kind of the range. Again, when we deliver units here, those will probably go up as the AMI has risen. But we have a huge commitment to affordable housing. It is at our very core. We have, again, 10,000 units either under development or in Illinois. And we were instrumental in leading legislation that got passed in Springfield called Affordable Illinois, which has allowed well over 1,000 affordable units to be built in Chicago in the last few years, and will result in tens of thousands of new affordable units being built in the city of Chicago over the next decades. It's something we're enormously kind of committed to and proud of our legacy on. So affordable housing will be coming as soon as we can make the numbers work to build housing on the site.
All right. The next question, I'm not sure if this person meant on-site residents or residents generally of the city or residents of the South Loop. I don't know. Will residents be offered free parking in the public parking garage on non-game days? Jeff.
So the parking facility is going to be operated like any other municipally owned parking facility. So there will be a revenue component to cover operating expenses. But I think that over the next several years, we can have considerations of potential programming that provide an additional benefit that the parking lot can leverage.
All right. And then it says, how will the generated revenue from the city-owned parking lot be used? I think the answer to that is that it flows into the city's general corporate fund. unless you have a different response, Jeff?
Yeah, so the excess cash flow will be captured in an excess reserve account that would then be utilized for both additional future improvements so that additional dollars don't come out of the TIF district, but also for future activation and investment within the podium of 78 itself.
Okay, so it is in a lockbox.
Yes.
Okay. Next question. I've heard that significant investment will be made to parking. What investments in non-car centric will be made to avoid the 78 becoming a massive traffic generator? Let's see. Vic, I think you or Andrew, you talked about bike lanes and divvy bikes, and maybe you want to get into that a little more.
Sure, I can start. Good evening again. So when we looked at the Alderwoman, as you mentioned, right, the location of the site in close proximity to three CTA lines, the metro station, and then a lot of what we call like other related entertainment uses. The expectation is there's going to be a variety of ways that people get here. And let's start with the game days, and maybe even the fire team can speak to this. I think they have a very good understanding of their fan base and how they come, which will help with the traffic management strategies we spoke to, predictability of parking, people arriving and not searching for parking, but exactly knowing where they're going to go. And a lot of the traffic around special events comes from that circulation. And there's a robust management plan that's been put forward to help people go to where they need to be quickly and efficiently when they're getting there by car. But there are all those non-automobile ways of getting there. And then also kind of the time of arrival is expected to, with some of these things we see in the photo here, right? The pregame type of opportunities, people to come earlier. It's not all one massive rush. So we do believe there's kind of those operational strategies that help take the edge off. It sounds like, a big stadium with a lot of people, you see that all at once, but how it arrives and trickles in and how it leaves and trickles out is a big part of the proposal that was presented to CDOT and we reviewed to help ease the operations in the area.
Okay, thank you, Vic. Next question. What is the expected construction timeline and how will noise, dust, and closures be managed for current residents? So why don't we, Dave, if you could talk about the construction timeline for the stadium, and then Kurt, maybe you or Andrew could talk about the construction timeline for the infrastructure improvements that are in phase one.
Sure. Just at a really high level, the stadium construction, assuming everything stays on schedule here, should be done by late spring or early summer 2028, with a start of the MLS season in summer 2028. So we are on schedule and charging very hard towards that.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I mean, I think we want our construction to be running as close to similar as possible with the fire. We want a great game day, first day experience, meaning you can walk from Roosevelt Road directly across feel like you're on ground plane and go right to the stadium. As far as, minimizing construction, noise, dust, et cetera, from the neighborhood. We are used to operating in very tight spaces in very dense neighborhoods and going up hundreds and hundreds of feet, close to 1,000 feet. And so, in this project, we're really today talking about low infrastructure and not being directly really, joining homes, if you will. We're either separated by Roosevelt Road, which is a very large street from the absolute closest place, or we have, hundreds and hundreds of feet to get to any of the neighbors to the east. And so we will conform, as we always do, with every Chicago rule and law on the construction. We're happy to kind of work with the neighbors on plans that we think can minimize those things or make it better. But I think it should be minimal, given the proximity or lack thereof to the neighbors.
And I'll just add that any closures, notifications are also typically posted by the alderman's office, and we would make a commitment to making sure that's done. The next question is for Dave. What guarantees that the Chicago Fire will even stay in that stadium? They already had a stadium specifically built for them in Naperville, and then they left. What will happen to the 78 if or when the Chicago Fire leaves?
Oh, no one's kicking us out. We're not even fully moved in just yet. Well, I think that the comment there may be a touch misinformed. The Chicago Fire played at North Central College in Naperville for one season during the Soldier Field renovation, whenever that was, 15, 20 years ago. That said, maybe the commenter is referencing SeatGeek Stadium, which is played where the Fire played out in Bridgeview for 13 or 14 seasons. That is a stadium that was constructed. The Fire played there. We had a lease. We did not own the stadium. We were tenants in that building. And when Joe Mansueto purchased the team, he made the decision to spend $65 million to buy out the remainder of that lease, which was negotiated with the city of Bridgeview to move the club back downtown to Chicago because of all the reasons you would think that it would make sense for your professional sports team to play sports in Chicago. That was a $65 million investment by Joe. I think it's safe to say that the Chicago Fire has 750 to 800 million reasons to stay in Chicago. We would not be signing up to be the catalyst and the anchor tenant of the 78, and Joe would not be investing so much of his own personal resources into this site if we were not long-term tenants, or long-term owners, long-term investors here. So we have no intention of leaving anytime. I can't even fathom something to that effect. So there is a significant reason for us to not consider moving, which is the large private investment that's taking place. This will be the number one soccer stadium in North America. We aspire for this to be the top sports entertainment destination in all of Chicago. And it'll be a great community resource. It'll not just be used for fire matches and concerts and things of the sort, but it'll be used for community events and farmers markets and skating rink and all the other things that we've spoken about here in the past. So we're very excited to get in there soon, and can't imagine a world where the Fire are leaving.
And Dave, it's adjacent to or nearby your training facility, is it not?
It is. I reference 800 million reasons to not move, but really, you can make it 900 because there was a $100 million investment that Joe made over on the near west side at Roosevelt and Ashland, where we built the Endeavor Health Performance Center. It's the number one training center in North America. All the top teams from Europe are coming over. The ones that play at Soldier Field, they train here. So we are very heavily rooted and invested in Chicago. When Joe purchased the team, that was a very conscious decision that he made, and plan to be here for the long haul.
All right, next question. Could you please go into more depth on the riverfront investments? Will habitat restoration or native replanting be part of the remediation? And on top of a new water taxi stop, how else will this investment activate the potential for waterfront recreation?
Andrew,
And
can
you
you
know
address
who
that?
the perfect person to answer this, Kurt, is your arc. You know who I'm talking about. I don't see her here.
Yeah, Ann Thompson, but in her
Yes.
stead, Andrew should be able to talk about this a little bit.
Yeah, I think there's a massive investment not only in the riverfront edge, and we've had several meetings with the groups interested in protecting our riverfront. That design is currently underway. I think that's a process that'll take time as the site evolves. We have an initial plan for stabilizing that edge and bringing people to the edge of that riverfront for about a quarter mile of the site centered on the soccer stadium. But that's a design process that will take place, and we'll have forums for discussion. But in terms of activation on the river edge, like Kurt said, we see this as a destination now at the south end of the river, where not only tour boats will stop, but water taxis will stop. And we've talked at length about the idea that this will be a pregame riverfront festival in some ways, right? And so as that develops and as the fire move in, we'll have a great understanding of how it's used and how to adapt our designs to maximize the impact of the river. It's our greatest asset on this site.
And there's Ann
Thank you,
Thompson.
Noah. Oh, go ahead, Kurt. I see Noah raised his hand and I think he wanted to add to this. And Ann, I see you. Good to see you.
Good to see
I'd
you
like for you to
too,
talk a little bit about the native replanting after Noah finishes. Noah?
Chairman, thank you. I was just going to add for the people on the call, we answered in one of the previous answers, we posted the link to the Plan Commission presentation, which just as a visual offers some of the overall master planning for the Riverwalk and shows the rooms that are planned for it. So you can use that link to get some of the information if you'd like to see some visuals.
And Ann, if you want to say anything to round out this question.
Sure. I mean,
And
I think, Andrew did a great job of talking a little bit about the opportunity and sort of the point of the process that we're in terms of design of the riverfront. But as Noah mentioned, if you refer to some of the diagrams that were a part of the PD process, we do contemplate a series of different sections across the riverfront, one of which is a softer edge that would provide an opportunity for sort of a wildlife soft edge at the riverfront. But we have a half mile of riverfront that we need to develop here. We're imagining that it's not going to be one note. You're going to have a variety of conditions across that site. As Andrew said, working towards a more natural edge where the riverfront meets Pingtown Park in particular. But this issue of wildlife habitat, I think, isn't just an issue for the riverfront. It will be something that we're thinking about as we're developing the landscape all across the site. So as we look at some of these landscape and hardscape areas all across the top of the podium, and as we move our way across the site, thinking about native planting habitat is something that is always part of the conversation.
Thanks, Ann. Next question. What is the expected date? What is the expected end date of this TIF that is currently being proposed? Jeff?
Yeah, the current expiration for Roosevelt Park is 2043.
20 what?
2043.
2043. Okay. Constantine, okay. Can TIF money be used to support building a new public high school on the 78?
Generally speaking, TIF funds can be used for school construction.
Okay. Let's see. Next question. Is the increase of TIF fund only affecting property taxpayers living around the red line?
Follow that question.
I'm not sure I follow that question.
What I can say that use of TIF funds typically don't have in the TIF district itself have any immediate impact. Typically, you will see an identical property within the TIF district and one that's nearby have similar real estate tax bills.
Okay, and with the 78 contributing more to property taxes eventually, should that, in theory, lead to lower property taxes for homeowners in the area?
Yes. More specifically, the generation of real estate taxes within the TIF district eventually will allow for addition to the levy and paying for other services the city offers. The whole point of TIF districts is to create that incremental value over time so that the future property taxes will be going towards the different tax communities on the expiration.
Okay, and we're going to stay with you, Jeff. What is the expected return on the parking?
In terms of like a return of investment, the parking structure itself is meant to be self-sustaining. I think that there's the additional benefits that creation of the podium infrastructure that includes the parking that will create additional benefits for vertical construction, additional vertical development on top of the podium. Also, I would say that the conclusion of the fire stadium and the operations from that will also have an impact from a tax revenue standpoint from sales tax, user tax, excise tax. So those are all part of the overall return on investment to the city.
Thank you. Dave, this is for you. How will the fire keep to their promise of having local small businesses at the commercial district of the stadium now that McDonald's has purchased the stadium's naming?
Sure. Happy to answer that question. We're very excited to have McDonald's as a part of the stadium. And, almost every naming rights partner is going to be a large corporation, right? And so, but I don't think we were ever on record of saying that we would have a naming rights partner that was a small business. However, the Fire are committed to activating with local businesses. And I think, hopefully you see that commitment from one, the three different GCs that we selected, all being Chicago-based. Our concessionaire, Levy, is a Chicago-based company. And one of the things that excited us the most when we went through the food and beverage process was we interviewed 5 or 6 different of the top concessionaires from all across the U.S. And Levy obviously had a benefit of being local, and there's a variety of reasons why that could be good and why maybe it could be bad. But one of the things that we were really excited about is Levy hired Steve Dolinsky, affectionately known as the food guy from Chicago. I see some head nods. And Steve came and talked to us about how the weekend before he had been eating at Moon Palace and went to 9 Bar right afterwards, and how he was frequenting all these different places from around Chicago to get an idea on what small businesses we should activate with at the Chicago Fire Stadium. And so there's always going to be some constraints. We have to work with people that can service a large event of 20 to 30,000 folks, right? And so there's some companies that makes sense for. There's somewhere it makes sense for them to take maybe a small piece of business, and there's some that can do something much larger. Everything from concessions, maintenance, janitorial, all the different vendors that any stadium would use, trash removal, et cetera. So those are all things that our construction team and the team here with the fire will be putting out to bid over the next several years. And we're excited to make sure that we're activating across Chicago. And it's always our preference to try and work with local companies. And we're excited to work with a variety of small businesses. So that hasn't changed. Our stadium naming rights, whether it was a bank, an insurance company, McDonald's, whoever, it was always going to be a large corporation given the investment level, but we're excited to activate with small businesses all throughout Chicago.
Okay, a little levity here. Steve Dolinsky at Moon Palace.
Yes, he loves it.
I
He
know where
loves it.
that is. I used to eat there.
Yeah.
How much retail space is planned? If not leased, what effect will that have on the TIF estimated profits?
How
How much effect will that have on the TIF / estimated profits?
Yeah, I'll answer that, and then anyone else can. But we want to build as much retail as we can. We build retail that we can lease. There's nothing worse than vacant retail, and so we want to have retail that's interesting, that's fun, that's different, that drives a fan experience. It also drives an experience for non-game days. So our first concentration will be trying to do retail kind of entertainment restaurant up along Roosevelt. But we envision any building that we have on the site, and we're going to have a lot of them, to have a retail component to it. Any successful retail on the site will obviously raise all boats. It will get us higher rents in the apartments. It will also drive more taxes on those spaces as well. So they all feed off of each other, and the density created by the residential will help to build more retail. Having more retail there will drive the desire for more people to want to live there, and we can build more resi. So it really is kind of a self-fulfilling prophecy with retail and the success of the fire and the success of the things we build on the site. They all really interlock. And if the other components are successful, we will build more retail because more people will be there and they'll be more successful.
All right, next question. Can tip dollars be used to cover the metro tracks from the LaSalle Street station to reduce noise pollution? The trains are pretty loud and early in the morning when starting up or leaving the station for being right next to residential properties.
Well, as I said earlier, we spent 8 years trying to work with Metra. A large component of that was on potentially building above the train tracks, and Metra was extremely reticent to do that. It was difficult to get us to be able to cover a very small portion of the train tracks just south of Roosevelt Road as they come underneath Roosevelt right now. So while we may agree with you that that would be a good idea to do that, I think it's going to be very difficult to have Metra agree with you, and those are their air rights.
Thanks, Kurt. Dave, this is for you. Are stadium neighbors going to have to see golden arches lighting up all over the stadium at night?
All the signage will be, part of the city signage plan that has been approved. And so all of our signage will fulfill all of that. Yes, there will be golden arches on the stadium, but we will make sure that we're adhering by all signage restrictions.
All right. This is for you as well, Dave. What is in place to minimize the noise of the events at the stadium, especially concerts and celebrations? How will you protect the peace and quiet or cultural events that people currently enjoy at Pingtown Park?
Sure, happy to answer this. So, it was I think it was the second community meeting we brought this up, the second public larger community meeting that we did here on Zoom, and we actually had a specialist from ME Engineers, which is the sound engineering group that the Chicago Fire contracted, and we learned a couple unique things. One, the majority of the sound stays inside the stadium, whether it's from a game or from a concert, given that we have a canopy. So unlike Soldier Field that's open, or Wrigley or some of the other Chicago stadiums or stadiums across country, soccer stadium, we will have all of our seats protected by a canopy. And there is also some windscreens to the east and a really tall brick facade. So what that does is it contains a lot of the noise, which is great for our fans and for our players on the pitch. But the majority of that sound dissipates over about 100 yards. So as you think about any of the sound that is kind of leaking from outside the stadium, most of it should have subsided by the time that it reaches Pingtown Park, or by the time that it reaches the neighbors to the east across the tracks and across Clark. So feel very confident that we've done a sound study and are all set there.
All right. Kurt, I think I think I know the answer to this, but what time does construction work hours start and end? I believe the noise ordinance says 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Yes, I believe, Alderman, that's what it is.
All right. So we're at 7:30 now. We're going to go for another half hour, and then all the questions that are remaining, we'll take them down and we'll get answers to that and put that on the website or send that out in a e-blast. Will Roosevelt Road improvements extend to the Roosevelt Street Station? How far to the west? The slide makes it seem like it's only between the river and Clark Street. Vig?
Good evening again. So the initial phase is between the river and Clark Street. That's the segment that is immediately fronting the development parcel, and where Jeff can confirm that the TIF district lies. Well, we are working, Chairwoman Dowell, with your office and the developer to look at the opportunities for streetscaping east of Clark Street, to have that continuous and attractive pedestrian environment all the way to the Red Line and Orange Line and Green Line station. But for the purposes of the TIF district, I may just ask Jeff to clarify the boundary, but we're looking at it comprehensively, but funding will have to follow those boundaries.
And to whoever asked that question, I want you to know that this is like top of mind for me. The importance of doing some streetscaping between Clark and I want to go all the way to Michigan Avenue. And I know that it's going to take the support and advocacy of my colleagues, Alderman Conway, which represents the main portion of that area, and Alderman Lamont Robinson, who also has a portion of that area as well. And I think between the three of us and some others, we can perhaps try to identify the money to do this. This is really, really important to me. Just as I've heard from constituents that the pedestrian bridge on the southern end of the site is key, and we've been able to include that in this first phase. The streetscaping along Roosevelt Road between, as I said, Clark and Michigan is equally as important. Whew. All right. Will some of these thousands of jobs that you speak of, Kurt, be held by residents from the surrounding areas, Chinatown, Bronzeville, etc.?
Yes, absolutely. Yannette, we'll talk about that quickly here, who's responsible for kind of a lot of these things we're doing in on other big projects around the city. I will say also that with regards to affordable housing, we will endeavor to have a preference for people that work around the 78 for the affordable housing there. I think we want to build affordable housing on the site that gets utilized by people that are working around this area. We were able to do a preference like that for something else, but on 400 Lakeshore Drive, and we'll push to have programs like that that create kind of a great neighborhood for everybody outside of the boundaries of the 78 as well. So Yannette.
Hi, Alderwoman. To answer your question, yes, we have been very intentional about putting out opportunities for hires on the construction projects that we build across the city. And so that would not change at this site as well. So as it relates to local hires, we would definitely do that. And we're required by the city ordinance to do 50% city residency. So we'll be pushing for that as well. Dave, I don't know if you want to add a little bit more to that.
Yeah, I think it goes back to my kind of my similar talk track around small businesses, right? The Chicago Fire are really committed to employing local businesses and vendors and also local individuals as part of our day-to-day operations at the stadium.
Okay, thank you for that. Next question. Would you eventually add additional east-west connection points on the site or nearby to help complete the street grid, especially if Wells Wentworth connection may be closed on game days?
I think that goes back to my previous discussion about, we do have a connection which kind of gets overlooked, but there is an existing four-way interchange that just needs to be opened up at 13th Street, just, south of Roosevelt Road, that will give you your connection from the eastern side of the property across or from Clark Street. And then again, the next instance would be 18th Street. In between those two areas, with Metra not moving, it will be physically impossible to have vehicular traffic cross over the railroad tracks.
All right, thank you for that. Vig, I think this question is for you. Do plans for bike lane improvements mentioned for Wells Street include the removing of additional street permit parking spaces? We've already lost 80 plus spaces from bike lane additions almost 4 years ago. Expect a revolt from current residents to the north of Roosevelt if any more spaces are proposed for removal.
Good evening. So the adjustments to Wells Street north of the 78 site, we anticipate to be minor in nature to facilitate some of the game day traffic operations strategies that we mentioned earlier, like traffic aids to allow people in and out of the site. We do not anticipate any significant reconfiguration of the street from Harrison to Roosevelt on Wells. And then the Wells Wentworth connector through the 78 all the way down to 18th Street has already been constructed with we call them like sidewalk level bike lanes. So that wouldn't have any parking impact on the community either.
Okay. Alderman Conway, did you want to add anything to that? Because I know this is your area. Okay. The 24 bus doesn't run on the weekends or at night, which is when most of the Fire games are expected to be played. Will the 24 bus start running on the weekends and later on weeknights once the stadium is up and running? I don't have the answer to that. The CTA is not here, but I will take this question and run it up the CTA flagpole and see if I can get an answer for you on this. And if I don't know who this person is, but if you would send an email to ward03@cityofchicago.org, we can get an answer to you on this question. Dave, what is an example of the stadium canopy to mitigate noise in another city?
That's a good question. Pretty much any, maybe not any, most MLS stadiums, especially the more recent ones that have been constructed, have canopies over top. So Miami, Nashville, Austin, New York City's building one right now. These are all yeah, in St. Louis. These are all areas that have stadiums constructed with a canopy over top. So those I would point people to look to those. You can hop on Google and kind of see the images of what these stadiums look like.
All right. I don't know who gets this next question. Thank you for that, Dave. Can the current sanitary and sewer infrastructure accommodate the addition of stadium traffic and new residences? Maybe Jeff, you could take a stab at that. I don't think that the infrastructure is currently in place, right? Isn't this what the TIF is designed to address?
Alderman, you're absolutely correct. The anticipated plan is to deliver new sewer, water, electric infrastructure as part of phase one. And I do believe that the additional connectivity for the stadium specifically is getting funded by the $750 million investment the fire is putting into the site as well.
All right. Thank you for that. Alderman Dowell's support was based on a traffic study that determined the stadium was not overloading the existing streets. During the last town hall, it was confirmed that the traffic study did not account for the temporary parking lots. Now the plan shows even more temporary parking on the lot. These lots could be here for 5 to 10 more years as the site gets built out. How many spaces are in these lots? And why are these lots allowed to be built when they explicitly induce additional driving to games, exceeding the capacity shown in the traffic study? I don't know. Noah, is this one of yours or Vig?
I can
Dave?
start it and then I can probably use some help from the others. But so the surface lots that you see on phase one are temporary in nature. They become future development sites as the other sites come in for proposed development. And all those proposed developments will undergo site plan approval and courtesy presentations at Plan Commission to reevaluate traffic impact and traffic studies with DPD and CDOT. So they're not meant to be long-term solutions. And then I don't know if CDOT or the fire want to chime in.
I'm happy to chime in on the fire. I'm not sure I fully understand the question. I don't think there's been any switching of plans, none that I'm aware of. This is kind of what we've shown all along, and that parking to the south is temporary. So it's a meanwhile use, and as soon as Related's ready to get developing, that will go away. So I don't think there's been any switching of plans, none that I've seen. So I'm not sure that's entirely.
Spaces are in that lot, Dave?
Say that again.
How many spaces are in the
So
lot?
the
Roughly 700.
700 spaces in the south lot. There's about 1,200 spaces in the garage to the north of the stadium.
Okay.
Guys, the positive of the question was that we didn't contemplate that parking within the traffic study. I don't think that's accurate. I think that we did.
I don't think that's accurate either.
So, I mean, we
Well,
could
those
talk.
lots were always determined to be temporary, and they were always part of the plan.
Yes, correct.
Will the Chicago will the Chicago Stars FC, now see, I don't know soccer, so you have to tell me what FC stands for, Dave, play at the stadium too, or will the new stadium only be for the men's team?
FC stands for football club, as it's
Okay.
affectionately called, primarily through Europe, Alderman Dowell. And no, there's no current plan for the Chicago Stars FC, or the group formerly known as the Chicago Red Stars, to play at the stadium. They're currently playing up in Evanston, at Northwestern's campus. That being said, if down the road there's interest from them to play at the stadium and there's community support and the alderman agrees, that's something that we're open to entertaining, but there's no current plan. There's no current conversations taking place between our two organizations. There hasn't been in a long time. And Alderman Dowell, as you're well aware, the Chicago Fire have a cap of 45 events, inclusive of our 17 regular season matches. So we would need that to be changed and amended if we were to have another professional sports team play there. So we cheer on the women's team here in Chicago, the NWSL team, and wish them the best of luck up north, but there's no current plans for them to play at the stadium.
Thank you for that. I guess this is for Andrew. The mentioned 2-acre green space on the podium, is that a long-term commitment or a temporary use?
That's a long-term commitment that exists in our plan development. It's planned to be open space the day that the garage opens with access to the stadium, and it's a space that's planned. Development is planned around to maintain throughout the life of the project.
Okay. We're getting to the end, guys. What will happen when there is an event at Soldier Field and a fire game? Right now, then there is an event at Soldier Field, the area, okay, it was when. Right now, when there is an event at Soldier Field, the area is complete gridlock. What are the plans to avoid additional gridlock during dual events?
I'm happy to jump in here. Obviously, first and foremost, we currently play at Soldier Field. And so we work very closely with the Chicago Parks District as a tenant to understand schedule constraints and when the stadium is open for us to play our matches. And we would anticipate that relationship will continue even once we get our own stadium. So we're going to do our best to not ever book double events. In the event where there is an event that is double booked, because I'm not going to say it could never happen. Sometimes schedules change. You have playoff games, tournaments, etc. Or there could be a concert that gets rained out at Soldier Field and they have to play it the next day, which turns out to be one of our matches. There's a variety of ways it could happen. We're going to do our best to avoid it. But if it does, we'll work with CDOT and we'll work with OEMC and everything else to try and do our absolute best to come up with the best parking plan. And, we're not opposed to a variety of different ways to ensure that we do our absolute best to make sure that everyone's getting to and from the stadium in a safe and efficient way that is the least amount disruptive to residents.
Thank you. Kurt, is there any chance Related Midwest pays an in lieu fee and the 20% affordable housing is not entirely on the 78 site?
We do have a $10 million deposit, which we made about 7 years ago with the city to contemplate some of those units being off-site. So the city, again, has had the use of that for, I don't know whether it's close to 7 years or so. So no, we don't have any plans to do anything off-site in lieu. That really hasn't been a plan that's worked much since we passed Affordable Illinois. The 20% has been kind of on-site, if you will. So that's the plan.
All right, thank you for that. Canadian National is still planning to move their rail bridge near 16th Street slightly north. How will this impact or relate to the 78? Will this impact the 78's plan for more natural areas on the southern part of the site? Will their bridge project be delayed to allow for all of this construction? I haven't had any conversation with Canadian National on, I don't see how, I don't see the impact here. Kurt, are you foreseeing any issue here?
No, they did do some work. I think they had a bigger plan. Charlie, you can correct me. I think they had like a more robust plan to fix the overpass over Roosevelt. They instead did kind of a half measure, and I think that's going to keep them for a while. Charlie, is that right?
Yeah, that was over Clark Street. There was some rehab.
Clark. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry.
So that work was done, but I don't know that we're aware of any future additional major CN projects that would impact our construction of this work.
Right, I haven't heard from them, and I know that work that you speak of, Charlie, was done maybe 1 or 2 years ago.
Right.
All right. What about I think we have 2 more questions left. What about infrastructure improvements for Wells Street north of Roosevelt? Going from a dead-end street to a busy street, things like traffic lights, speed bumps, etc., will be needed to improve safety. Vig?
Yes, so that's something we'll certainly look at as the operations evolve. The primary mode of access for the site is to use the Wells Wentworth connector from the south, where there's more capacity in the street network. Some of the circulation and access diagrams based on the attendance base for this facility demonstrate like more access from the south. So we will certainly work together with Alderman Conway's office and residents, as CETA is always there to look at traffic calming and other measures as patterns of use change over time. However, as mentioned earlier, there have been investments in this part of Wells Street in recent years, including some traffic calming and protected bike lane safety improvements already.
Thank you. Can there be additional east-west access outside of Roosevelt, even off-site, to help with access, particularly over the river? I don't know who can answer that. I don't think anyone here, I don't know who asked that question, but I don't think that is a question that can be answered by Related Midwest alone, since the area west of the river is not owned by them. All right.
Look, we would absolutely be open to it, Alderman. I think yes, it takes two to tango, as they say, and we would need an agreement with the owner of the land next door, which I think the owner of the land next door is currently Amtrak. But maybe someone else, and we would work with them.
Okay. Is a potential orange line stop possible?
Charlie, can you tell? I don't think that's viable.
Yeah, I mean, it's not on our site that we have any real control over, but I think we would certainly entertain any conversations about ways we can, try to improve public transit access long term for this area.
Noah, I'm going to send this next one to you. Did anyone anticipate the traffic pattern impacts if the White Sox builds a stadium on the other side of the river?
Thanks, Chairwoman. We don't have any proposals that we've seen or looked at that show any other stadiums in the immediate vicinity. If and when that became a possibility, certainly we would work with our colleagues at CDOT and we would reevaluate traffic studies that developer may propose, and we would look at ways to mitigate those traffic patterns accordingly. I don't know if VIG wants to build on that, but certainly that's common course for any development that gets proposed in an area.
Vic, did you want to add anything?
I think this is a very good summary. We always look at approved developments when we work together with DPD and the community to model the benefits and potential impacts of development. So right now, when we looked at this site, we looked at everything else approved in the area. As Noah mentioned, we don't have any such plan. If such a plan were to be presented, we would look at how what's been approved here and has already been entitled could be anticipated to have some cross impacts, and we would go from there.
All right, and these are the last two questions. Kurt, I'm going to throw this one to you because I'm not sure I agree with the premise. Although the 78 will bring investment, it will also bring mass displacement, as do all luxury developments of this scale. How do you mitigate inevitable displacement of surrounding low-income communities of color that the 78 development will cause?
Yeah, I would say this is kind of, in some circles, very popular to talk about. There really isn't historical empirical evidence of things like this occurring. And again, our premise on the site and our 35-year history in Chicago here is building affordable housing, doing affordable housing in the developments that we build. So we think certainly when we talk about the things that we're going to bring to bear here, which should make everything better in the neighborhood as far as energy and retail and residential, we're gonna have a large commitment to affordable housing. As for the areas surrounding us, look, I mean, I don't see any massive displacement happening. And again, if there are examples of this, we'd be happy to look at it and try to mitigate those. Again, it's something popular to talk about. It's hard to find how that would really occur.
Yeah, I would need to have some understanding of more specifically the locations this particular person is thinking about. Because when I think of what's adjacent to this area, I'm having a hard time with the premise of that. Last question. TIF dollars are useful for the site, but should not be used for parking. 1,200 spaces means 1,200 additional cars driving through the neighborhood, increasing congestion. Why should TIF funds be used for something that will actively harm our neighborhood?
I'll take a stab at that. Although, yes, there will be additional traffic that would be limited likely to the event days. I think that the TIF investment itself is funding a much larger podium structure and the infrastructure. It's not really necessarily being specific to the parking structure. Again, the parking component to this was an innovative way to create essentially a cash flow piece of infrastructure that's required in order to unlock the future vertical development of the entire site itself.
All right. Well, I don't see any more questions, so I just like to add my 2 cents. First, I want to thank people for attending tonight. I think the takeaway I would like for people to have, because the press reporting on this sometimes doesn't understand actually what TIFs are used for. It is not being used to subsidize the Chicago Fire Stadium. The Chicago Fire Stadium is being privately financed with private money, and that the TIF dollars are being used for just what TIF was designed to do, which is to fund infrastructure improvements in blighted areas. And this area is indeed blighted. It's 40 years vacant. It's 62 acres, and without it, one, you're not going to be able to use the stadium, and two, it doesn't unlock the potential of the site. And that's what the whole purpose of this TIF is. I look forward to hearing more. If you have questions that were not answered, feel free to reach out to me at ward03@cityofchicago.org. I would like to thank the staff for making this meeting possible. And I hope everybody's questions were answered. And if you have more, send them on. We will look into the CTA question, and I think there was another question that I know staff took down that was not answered tonight, but we will seek to get answers for you on that. I want to thank the departments, the Department of Planning, the Department of Transportation. I want to thank my colleagues, Alderman Conway, Alderman Irvin, and Alderman Lee for their support and for being here. I want to thank Dave Baldwin and Charlie Trotier from the Chicago Fire, and to Kurt Bailey from Related Midwest and his team for showing up tonight. Thank you all very much. Have a nice evening and enjoy the rest of the summer. Bye.
Thank you, Alderman. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Alderman.